The scent of blood and pine needles choked the air, a grotesque perfume clinging to the forest floor. Serena clawed her way through the undergrowth, her breath sawing in her lungs, the sounds of battle echoing behind her like monstrous thunder. Branches tore at her tunic, snagged in her dark hair, but she didn't slow. She couldn't. Her pack, the whispering pines, was falling. Their borders, held sacred for generations, had been breached by the relentless warriors of the Moonstone Dominion, led by their formidable Alpha Prince Xavier. He was a name whispered in fear and reluctant admiration, a force of nature sculpted into the shape of a man, or rather, a wolf of immense power. Panic threatened to swamp her, cold and sharp. Her father, the Alpha of Whispering Pines, had sent her with a small scouting party to assess the enemy's movements near the northern ridge. A fatal miscalculation. They hadn't anticipated the sheer speed and ferocity of the Moonstone advance. Ambushed. Overwhelmed. She saw her pack brothers fall. Valiant but outnumbered, her own escape felt like a betrayal. A bitter pill swallowed with every ragged gasp of air. She had to reach the main encampment, warn them, give them a fighting chance. A twig snapped nearby, too close. Serena froze, every muscle tensed, her senses straining against the cacophony of the receding battle. She sank lower behind a thicket of ferns, trying to control her breathing, making herself small. Through the fronds, she saw him. Not Xavier himself, but one of his wolves, larger than any Whispering Pines wolf she'd ever seen. Its fur the color of charcoal smoke, eyes burning with cold, predatory light. It sniffed the air, head low, tracking her scent. Trapped. There was no outrunning it in this terrain. Not now. Her training kicked in. The ingrained instincts of a Luna, a protector. She wouldn't be taken easily. Drawing the hunting knife strapped to her thigh, a small comfort against such a beast, she prepared herself. The wolf advanced, a low growl rumbling in its chest. It lunged. Serena sidestepped, adrenaline surging, and slashed sideways with her blade. A satisfying yelp echoed as she nicked its flank, drawing blood, but the victory was fleeting. The wolf, enraged rather than deterred, spun with terrifying agility. Before she could react, powerful jaws clamped down on her arm, not tearing, but holding with inescapable force. Pain shot through her, white-hot and blinding. She cried out, dropping the knife as she was dragged from her hiding place, stumbling into a small clearing. And then he was there, Alpha Prince Xavier. He stood tall and imposing, even in his human form, radiating an aura of absolute command that seemed to dim the very forest light. Clad in dark leather armor that bore the sigil of a snarling wolf against a crescent moon, his presence was overwhelming. His hair was as black as a moonless night, pulled back severely from a face carved from granite, all hard lines and sharp angles. But it was his eyes that held her captive, even before his wolf had physically done so. They were the color of ice, startlingly pale against his tanned skin. And they assessed her with a chilling lack of emotion, missing nothing. He saw the torn tunic, the dirt, the defiance warring with fear in her expression, the blood welling from the wolf's bite on her arm. The wolf holding her whined softly, looking to its alpha. Xavier gave a curt nod, and the pressure on her arm eased slightly, though the grip remained firm. His gaze swept over her, lingering for a moment on the Whispering Pines, insignia crudely stitched onto her sleeve. "A scout," he stated, his voice deep and resonant, devoid of inflection. It wasn't a question. "From the Alpha's own bloodline, I presume. You have the look of Riker about you. Serena straightened her shoulders, ignoring the throbbing pain in her arm. She would not show weakness before this man. This conqueror, I am Serena, daughter of Alpha Riker, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. And you trespass on our lands, Prince Xavier. A flicker of something, amusement, interest, crossed his glacial eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. Your lands. He gestured vaguely towards the sounds of fighting, now growing more distant. The borders shift with the tide of battle. Luna Serena, today, the tide favors the moonstone. He stepped closer, invading her space, forcing her to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. The air crackled with tension, with the sheer, raw power emanating from him. He was close enough for her to see the faint lines etched around his eyes, hinting at sleepless nights or constant vigilance. Close enough to smell the scent of ozone and cold fury clinging to him. Your pack fights fiercely, he conceded, a statement of fact, not praise. But they fight a losing battle. We defend our homes, Serena retorted, injecting steel into her voice. Something your kind apparently knows nothing about, preferring to take what isn't yours. His expression hardened, the ice in his eyes seeming to chip. We take back what was stolen generations ago. Your history texts conveniently forget the moonstone blood spilled to carve out the very territory your father now claims. He looked down at her arm, then back at the wolf holding her. Enough. Bring her. Panic surged anew. Where are you taking me? You are a valuable prisoner, Xavier stated simply, turning away as if the matter was settled, his dark cloak swirling around him. A daughter of the Alpha, your father will think twice about further resistance. Knowing you are in my custody, he won't bargain for me, Serena cried out, struggling against the wolf's grip, futilely. He wouldn't sacrifice our people. Xavier paused at the edge of the clearing, looking back over his shoulder. His profile was stark against the shadowed trees. We shall see, he said softly, the words carrying an unnerving weight. Every Alpha has a breaking point, especially for their kin. 2 more Moonstone warriors emerged from the trees, their expressions grim, their movements economical. They flanked her, their grips firm but impersonal, taking over from the wolf, which melted back into the shadows at a silent command from Xavier. They began to march her away, deeper into territory she no longer recognized as her own, away from the fading sounds of her pack's desperate struggle. Serena stumbled, her head swimming from the pain and the shock. She glanced back, hoping for a sign, a miracle, but there was only the imposing figure of Alpha Prince Xavier, watching her retreat, his face an unreadable mask. Captured, a prisoner, her heart clenched with a mixture of fury and despair. She was trapped in the claws of the Moonstone Dominion, subject to the whims of its cold, ruthless prince. Her resistance had barely begun, but already she felt the crushing weight of his power settling over her like a shroud. The journey to the Moonstone heartland was a blur of forced marches and grim silence. Serena was treated not with overt cruelty, but with a detached efficiency that was somehow more chilling. Her wound was cleaned and bandaged by a stern-faced healer who offered no words of comfort, only curt instructions. She was given food and water, enough to sustain her, but never enough to feel satisfied. Her guards changed shifts with practiced regularity, their faces impassive, their eyes watchful. They spoke little, either to her or amongst themselves, existing solely to ensure her compliance and containment. She tried to glean information, listening intently to the snippets of conversation she overheard, observing the landscape, searching for any sign of weakness, any opportunity. But the Moonstone warriors were disciplined, their movements precise, their camps well fortified. Hope dwindled with each passing mile, replaced by a gnawing anxiety about her father, her pack, their fate. Had they survived? Was the fighting over? Or was she merely a pawn in a game whose rules she didn't understand? Finally, after days that bled into one another, they reached the stronghold of the Moonstone Dominion. It wasn't a castle perched precariously on a crag, as she might have imagined, but a fortress integrated seamlessly into the imposing mountain range that formed the spine of their territory. Stone walls, weathered by centuries of harsh winds and unforgiving seasons, rose sheer and gray, blending with the natural rock formations. Towers pierced the sky like stone talons. Banners bearing the Moonstone sigil snapping crisply in the wind. It was a place of undeniable strength, formidable and unwelcoming, as Serena was escorted through the massive gates. The heavy iron grating shut behind her with a clang that echoed deep in her soul, sealing her fate. Inside, the fortress bustled with activity, yet retained an air of disciplined order. Warriors patrolled the ramparts, servants hurried through stone corridors, and the low murmur of conversation hummed beneath the surface. Eyes followed her as she passed, curious, hostile, indifferent. She was the enemy, the captured Luna, a symbol of their prince's victory. She lifted her chin, refusing to bow to their scrutiny, her gaze fixed forward, masking the turmoil within. She was led not to a dank dungeon, as she had half expected, but up winding stone staircases, deeper into the heart of the fortress. Finally, her guards stopped before a heavy oak door, banded with iron. One produced a key. The lock turned with a heavy click, and the door swung inward. They gestured for her to enter. The room was surprisingly spacious, though sparsely furnished. A bed covered with thick furs, a sturdy wooden table and chair, a wash basin, and a small, heavily barred window high on one wall offering a sliver of gray sky. It was clean, functional, undeniably a prison cell, yet far from the squalor she might have endured. A tray of food, bread, cheese, dried meat, and a pitcher of water sat on the table. Compared to the rations on the march, it was a feast. "You will remain here," one of the guards stated flatly. "Attempting escape would be unwise. The fortress is labyrinthine, and the patrols are constant." His eyes held a warning. "Do not cause trouble." The door shut with grim finality, the key turning in the lock again. Serena stood alone in the silence, the reality of her captivity crashing down on her. She walked slowly towards the window, straining to see out. All she could glimpse was more gray stone, another part of the fortress complex, and the distant snow-capped peaks of the surrounding mountains. Imprisoned, utterly alone, days turned into a monotonous cycle. Food arrived silently, the empty tray removed later. Sometimes she heard the distant sounds of training drills in the courtyard below, the clang of steel, the shouts of commanders. Other times, an oppressive silence filled the stone chamber, broken only by her own breathing. She paced the confines of her room like a caged animal, frustration and anger simmering beneath the surface. She refused to break, refused to weep where her captors might see or hear. Instead, she focused her energy, studying the room, testing the bars on the window immovable, examining the heavy door impenetrable. She practiced the calming techniques her mother had taught her, centering herself, conserving her strength. Her thoughts constantly returned to Xavier, the Alpha Prince, cold, calculating, powerful. Why keep her here in relative comfort rather than a dungeon? Was it a sign of respect for her rank? Or merely a different kind of torment, a way to break her spirit slowly through isolation and uncertainty? She remembered the fleeting glimpse of something other than ice in his eyes in the forest, the way he had acknowledged her pack's bravery. Was there more to him than the ruthless conqueror? The thought was dismissed almost as soon as it formed. He was the enemy. He had ordered the attack, overseen the subjugation of her people. Any perceived softness was likely a facade, another weapon in his arsenal. One evening, perhaps a week into her confinement, time blurred in the unchanging environment. The door opened unexpectedly. Serena tensed, instinctively moving to put the table between herself and the entrance. It wasn't a guard with her meal. It was Xavier. He stood framed in the doorway, just as imposing as he had been in the forest, though now he wore simpler, dark clothing, devoid of armor. His presence filled the small room, shrinking it further. His icy gaze swept over her, taking in her defiant posture, the worn state of her single tunic, the way she held herself ready for a fight. "Luna Serena," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in the stone walls. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, though not locking it. A subtle display of power. He didn't need locks to control the situation. "Prince Xavier," she replied, keeping her voice level, refusing to be intimidated. "To what do I owe this visit?" He walked slowly towards the window, his back to her for a moment as he gazed out at the sliver of sky. "I wished to see how our guest was faring." The word guest hung in the air, laced with irony. "As well as can be expected for a prisoner of war," Serena retorted sharply. "Or have you decided on my fate? Ransom? Execution? Or am I to languish here indefinitely?" He turned back to face her, leaning casually against the cold stone wall. The faint light from the high window caught the sharp planes of his face. "Your fate is yet undecided. It depends largely on your father's actions." "My father values his people above all else," Serena insisted, frustration making her voice tremble slightly. "He will not yield our ancestral lands. Not even for me, perhaps," Xavier conceded, his expression unreadable. "But the bonds of blood run deep. Even the strongest alphas have vulnerabilities." He paused, his gaze intensifying. "Tell me about the whispering pines, your traditions, your strengths." Serena frowned, suspicious. Was this an interrogation disguised as conversation? A way to gather intelligence? Why would I share anything about my pack with the man who seeks to destroy it? "Understanding one's enemy is crucial," Xavier stated simply. "And perhaps understanding is the first step towards something other than conflict." The word surprised her. Was he suggesting peace, or was it another manipulation? She studied him, searching for any sign of deception in those cold eyes, but found only stillness, a carefully guarded neutrality. "Our strength lies in our unity," she said cautiously, deciding to offer a partial truth. "We are bound by loyalty. Not just blood, we protect our own. We value the forest, the balance of nature. We do not seek conquest." The implication hung heavy in the air, unlike you. Xavier didn't react to the barb. Instead, he pushed away from the wall and walked towards the table, picking up the simple wooden cup left from her last meal. He turned it over in his large hands, his gaze distant. "Unity, loyalty, these are valuable things." He set the cup down. "They are also fragile." He looked directly at her again. "There are those within any pack, any dominion, who value personal gain above collective well-being. Ambition can be a poison. Was he warning her or boasting about the supposed disunity within her own pack that led to their defeat? His words were cryptic, layered. "Are you suggesting my pack harbored traitors?" Serena asked, bristling. "I am suggesting," Xavier said slowly, his voice dropping lower, "that you should be observant. Even here, walls have ears and shadows hold secrets." He met her eyes, a strange intensity flickering in their depths. "You are intelligent, Luna Serena, resilient. Do not waste those qualities on blind hatred. See what is truly happening around you." Before Serena could demand clarification, he turned and left as silently as he had arrived. The door clicked shut, leaving her alone once more. But now her mind raced. What did he mean? Observant. Secrets within these walls. Was the threat not just external, but internal as well? His visit had unsettled her far more than his initial capture. He had shown her a glimpse of something complex beneath the surface, a calculating mind, perhaps, but also something else, a weariness, a warning. Or was she projecting her own hopes onto her captor? She sank onto the edge of the bed, the prince's enigmatic words echoing in the stone chamber. See what is truly happening around you. He had given her a puzzle, and despite her captivity, a spark of defiant curiosity ignited within her. Perhaps this prison held more than just stone walls and locked doors. Perhaps it held answers. Serena took Xavier's cryptic advice to heart. If she was to survive, let alone find a way to help her pack, she needed information. Blind hatred was a luxury she couldn't afford. She began to pay closer attention, transforming her cell from a cage into an observation post. She listened intently when the guards changed shifts, catching fragments of conversation, complaints about patrol duty, gossip about court affairs, mentions of tension among the prince's council. She noted the routines, the times when the corridors outside her door were busiest or quietest. Her meals became opportunities. The servants who brought her food were often different, sometimes hurried, sometimes more deliberate. Most avoided eye contact, eager to leave the presence of the enemy Luna. But one, a young woman named Alara, with kind eyes and nervous hands, sometimes lingered for a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Serena started engaging her, offering a quiet thank you, asking simple, non-threatening questions about the weather, about the fortress. At first, Alara offered only monosyllabic replies, her gaze darting towards the door, but Serena persisted, maintaining a calm, respectful demeanor, showing none of the hostility the servant likely expected. Slowly, tentatively, Alara began to respond. She spoke of the harsh winters in the mountains, the preparations already underway. She mentioned the long hours demanded by the prince's council meetings, the strained atmosphere within the upper echelons of the fortress. Small details, perhaps insignificant on their own, but Serena carefully collected them, piecing together a mosaic of life within the Moonstone stronghold. One day, Alara lingered after placing the tray down, twisting the fabric of her apron. They say Prince Xavier spends many nights alone in the strategy room," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Looking at maps. Hardly sleeps." She glanced fearfully at the door again. "Some say he carries a great burden. A burden of his own making, perhaps." Serena couldn't resist replying, though she kept her tone soft. Alara flinched slightly. "Perhaps. But Lord Valerius, he speaks loudly in the council, urging harsher measures against your people. He says the prince is too hesitant. She swallowed hard. Be careful. Luna Serena. Not everyone here wishes the prince well. Before Serena could ask more, Alara scurried out, leaving Serena alone with this new piece of information. Lord Valerius. Serena searched her memory. She recalled seeing a stern, older wolf shifter among Xavier's retinue during her capture, his face etched with lines of impatience and authority. He was likely a high-ranking member of the Moonstone Pack, and he was pushing for harsher measures, undermining Xavier. This resonated with the prince's own cryptic warning about ambition and those who valued personal gain. Her confinement, paradoxically, offered her a unique perspective. As a prisoner, she was largely ignored, deemed powerless. People spoke more freely, assuming she couldn't understand or wouldn't dare act on anything she heard. She started listening more intently at the door, pressing her ear against the cold wood during the quieter hours of the night. She heard guards murmuring about supply discrepancies, about patrols being diverted from key areas without clear explanation. She heard whispers of Valerius meeting secretly with certain captains of the guard, men known for their loyalty to Valerius's family line rather than directly to Xavier. One night, huddled by the door, she overheard two guards talking in low tones. Valerius insists the southern pass needs reinforcing. One voice grumbled. Pulls half my patrol away. Makes no sense. The Whispering Pines wouldn't attack there, not after their losses. Orders are orders, the other replied wearily. But it leaves the supply route from the east vulnerable. Strange times. Strange, the first guard agreed. Almost like someone wants trouble on that route. The supply route. Vulnerable. Deliberately. Serena's mind raced. Sabotage. An attempt to weaken Xavier's position by disrupting resources. Or perhaps stage an incident to blame on her pack, escalating the conflict further, forcing Xavier's hand. Valerius's ambition seemed to have a dangerous edge. Her relationship with Xavier remained infrequent and tense. He visited occasionally, his appearances always unannounced, always unsettling. Their conversations were verbal sparring matches, layered with unspoken questions and guarded answers. He'd ask about her pack's healing practices, their knowledge of the mountain herbs. She'd counter with questions about his justification for the war, the state of her captured people. He never gave direct answers about her pack's fate, merely stating that the situation was complex and evolving. Yet, beneath the antagonism, Serena began to sense the things Alara had hinted at. She saw the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that never fully eased. She noticed how he sometimes paused, his gaze distant, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. During one visit, he found her sketching patterns in the dust on the floor with her finger, a habit from her childhood, mapping constellations her mother had taught her. He stopped, watching her silently for a moment. The Star Weaver, he murmured. Identifying the constellation, Serena looked up, surprised. You know our legends. I make it my business to know many things, he deflected. But there was a flicker of something less guarded in his eyes. My own mother used to point out the hunter and the great wolf. A shadow crossed his face, a fleeting glimpse of sorrow so profound it momentarily stunned her. He seemed to realize he'd revealed too much, his expression instantly shuddering again. Idle thoughts, he said curtly. Do not mistake knowledge for sentiment. But the slip hadn't gone unnoticed. It was a crack in the icy facade, revealing a hint of the man beneath the Alpha Prince, a man who had known loss, who perhaps felt the weight of his heritage, his responsibilities, more keenly than he let on. He was powerful, yes, and ruthless when necessary. But Alara's words about his burden, his solitude, began to resonate. He ruled a formidable dominion, but perhaps ruling was a lonely endeavor, especially with vipers like Valerius potentially circling. One afternoon, the routine was broken by raised voices echoing from the corridor. Serena pressed her ear to the door. It was Valerius, his tone sharp and demanding, arguing with Kaelin, Xavier's quiet but ever-present beta, known for his unwavering loyalty. Unacceptable delay. The prince's hesitation puts us all at risk, Valerius snarled. The Alpha Prince weighs all factors. Kaelin replied, his voice calm but firm. His decisions are not made lightly, nor are they yours to question so openly. My lord, factors. The only factor is victory. Swift, decisive victory. We should have pressed the advantage, crushed the Whispering Pines' remnants entirely. Keeping their Luna alive is a folly. She is a valuable asset, Kaelin countered, and the prince's prisoner. Her fate is his decision alone. His sentimentality will be our undoing, Valerius hissed, his voice dropping slightly but still audible. Mark my words, Kaelin. If Xavier will not secure our future, others will. The threat hung in the air, chilling Serena to the bone. Valerius wasn't just undermining Xavier, he was actively plotting, suggesting treason, and his words confirmed her value, not just as a bargaining chip, but potentially as a symbol whose continued existence frustrated the more aggressive factions within the Moonstone Pack. Xavier wasn't just holding her prisoner, he might, inadvertently or not, be protecting her from those who wanted her eliminated. The pieces began to click into place. The diverted patrols, the vulnerable supply route, Valerius's open challenges to Xavier's authority, the prince's own cryptic warnings. A conspiracy was undoubtedly brewing within the fortress walls, aimed directly at Xavier's throne, and she, the prisoner, was somehow caught in the middle. Her initial hatred for Xavier began to morph into something more complex. He was still her captor, the architect of her pack's suffering, but he was also facing betrayal from within his own ranks, carrying burdens she was only beginning to comprehend. And his enemy, Valerius, seemed far more dangerous, driven by naked ambition and a ruthlessness that lacked even the cold pragmatism Xavier displayed. Serena realized she had a choice. She could remain passive, hope for an opportunity to escape amidst the chaos if Valerius made his move, or she could use the information she had gathered. Sharing it with Xavier was a risk. He might dismiss her, see it as a trick. He might use the information and still keep her imprisoned, her fate unchanged. But if Valerius succeeded, what then? A harsher regime continued, perhaps escalated, war against her people. Valerius had called her existence a folly. Her chances under his rule seemed slim. For the first time since her capture, Serena felt a flicker of agency, a sense that her actions might still matter. Xavier had told her to be observant, to see what was truly happening. She had. Now, the question was, what would she do with that knowledge? The line between captor and captive, enemy and potential, reluctant ally began to blur in the shadows of the Moonstone Fortress. The decision weighed heavily on Serena. Trusting Xavier felt like a betrayal of her own pack, her own principles. He was the reason she was here, the reason her home was threatened. Yet, the alternative, allowing Valerius to potentially seize power through treachery, seemed demonstrably worse, not just for Xavier, but likely for the Whispering Pines as well. Valerius radiated a brutal ambition that promised only further bloodshed. She spent hours pacing her cell, replaying conversations, piecing together the fragments of overheard plots. The vulnerable supply route seemed the most immediate threat. If Valerius could orchestrate an attack, blame it on Whispering Pines remnants or even rogue elements, it would weaken Xavier's standing, proving his supposed hesitancy and fueling calls for more aggressive leadership. Valerius's leadership. She needed to warn Xavier, but how? Requesting an audience might raise suspicion, especially if Valerius caught wind of it. She couldn't rely on Alara to pass such a dangerous message. She needed a more direct, perhaps unexpected, opportunity, fate, or perhaps the shifting currents within the fortress provided one. A few evenings later, long after the usual time for her meal, the lock on her door scraped open. Instead of a guard or Alara, it was Kalen, Xavier's beta, who stood there. His usual calm demeanor was slightly ruffled, his expression tense. "Luna Serena," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The Alpha Prince requires your presence." Now, surprise and apprehension warred within her. "Why?" she asked, instinctively suspicious. Was this a trap? Had Valerius made his move? "There is a situation. Your knowledge of the eastern forests, the terrain near the disputed border may be valuable." Kalen didn't elaborate, his gaze urging compliance. "Come quickly and quietly." Her mind raced. The eastern forests, that was near the vulnerable supply route the guards had mentioned. Had something happened? This was her chance. She nodded curtly and followed Kalen out of the cell, her heart pounding. They moved swiftly through corridors less frequented, avoiding the main thoroughfares. The tension radiating from Kalen was palpable, confirming that this was no ordinary summons. He led her to the strategy room, a large chamber dominated by a massive table covered in maps, charts, and wooden markers representing troop positions. Torches cast flickering shadows on the stone walls, lined with weapon racks and rolled-up banners. Xavier stood hunched over the table, his back to the door, his focus entirely on the map before him. Several grim-faced captains and advisors were gathered around, their expressions anxious. The atmosphere was thick with worry. Xavier looked up as they entered, his icy gaze finding Serena instantly. There was no preamble, no acknowledgement of her prisoner status. "Luna Serena," he began, his voice tight with urgency. "A supply convoy, traveling the eastern route, is overdue. We've lost contact." He gestured towards the map. "This area here," he pointed to a densely wooded region marked with contours indicating difficult terrain. "It's near the old boundary stones. Treacherous ground. Your pack knows it better than ours. What are the dangers? Ambush points, hidden trails." Serena stepped closer to the table, her eyes scanning the familiar topography. This was the moment. She could provide the information, gain a measure of goodwill, but she needed to give him more. She needed to warn him about the why. "The Whispering Gorge runs through that sector," she said, her voice clear despite the tension. "Narrow, easily defended, perfect for an ambush. There are also game trails, barely marked, that bypass the main path, known only to experienced hunters." She traced a potential route with her finger. "But the real danger isn't just the terrain." Prince Xavier, all eyes turned to her. Xavier's gaze sharpened. "Explain." She took a deep breath, meeting his intense stare directly. "I believe this incident wasn't random, nor was it likely initiated by my people. We lack the strength or positioning for such an attack right now." She paused, letting her words sink in. I have reason to believe Lord Valerius has been manipulating troop deployments, deliberately weakening the security along this specific route. A stunned silence fell over the room. The captains exchanged uneasy glances. Valerius was a respected, powerful figure, second only to Xavier and Kaelin in influence. Accusing him of treason was unthinkable. Xavier's expression became unreadable, a mask of stone. "What reason?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Overheard conversations," Serena admitted, knowing how flimsy it sounded. Guards questioning patrol changes ordered by Valerius, leaving this route exposed. Whispers of secret meetings. His open challenging of your authority. His desire for harsher conflict. She looked around at the wary faces. He seeks to create chaos, Prince Xavier, to make you appear weak or indecisive, perhaps even stage an incident to blame on my pack, forcing your hand or undermining your rule. One of the captains, loyal to Valerius's faction, scoffed. Preposterous. The word of a prisoner, an enemy, enough. Xavier cut him off, his voice sharp as cracking ice. He didn't take his eyes off Serena. He seemed to be weighing her words, assessing her sincerity, searching for any hint of deception. The intensity of his scrutiny was almost physical. Serena held his gaze, projecting conviction she desperately hoped he would see. She had laid her cards on the table, risked everything on this gamble. After a long moment that stretched into eternity, Xavier spoke, his voice low but carrying absolute authority. "Kaelin, send riders to the Whispering Gorge immediately. Use the hidden trails Serena described. Maximum speed. Assess the situation. Engage only if necessary. Report back instantly." Kaelin nodded sharply and left the room without a word. Xavier then turned his attention back to the map, his mind clearly working rapidly. "The rest of you, maintain current positions. Increase vigilance within the fortress. No unusual movements. No unexplained orders are to be followed without my direct confirmation." His eyes swept over the captains, lingering for a fraction longer on the one who had scoffed. "Is that understood?" A chorus of yes, Alpha Prince answered him. He dismissed them with a curt nod, leaving only himself and Serena in the vast shadow-filled room. The silence returned, heavy and charged. Serena stood uncertainly, unsure of her standing now. Had he believed her? What happened next? Xavier finally looked at her, his expression still guarded, but something had shifted. The outright hostility was replaced by a complex mix of suspicion, calculation, and something else she couldn't quite name. Reluctant respect. "You took a great risk, Luna Serena," he said quietly, accusing one of my ranking lords. "The risk of doing nothing seemed greater," she replied honestly. "Valerius's ambition threatens more than just your rule. It threatens the fragile possibility of ending this conflict without further annihilation." Xavier finished her thought, his voice grim. He walked around the table until he stood directly in front of her, closer than he'd been since her capture. The sheer force of his presence was still potent, but the dynamic between them had irrevocably changed. She was no longer just a captive, she was an informant, a potential, albeit reluctant, ally. "Why?" he asked, the single word demanding a deeper explanation than her previous reasoning. "Why warn me, your captor?" Serena met his gaze steadily. "Because I have seen enough bloodshed, Prince Xavier. Valerius promises only more of it. For both our peoples." She hesitated, then added, "And because, despite everything, I do not believe you are the same as him. You seek control, dominance eyes, but he seeks destruction." A muscle twitched in Xavier's jaw. He studied her face intently, as if seeing her for the first time. The sounds of the fortress seemed distant, muffled. In the flickering torchlight, she saw again that flicker of vulnerability she'd glimpsed before, the weight of command, the isolation of his position. "Your assessment is astute," he finally conceded, the word seemingly costing him some effort. He turned slightly, looking back at the map, at the markers representing the missing convoy, the potential trap. "If what you suspect is true, Valerius has moved from subtle maneuvering to open betrayal. He is forcing my hand. What will you do?" Serena asked, drawn into the unfolding drama despite herself. Xavier looked back at her, his icy eyes holding a new depth. "I will protect my dominion. From all threats, external and internal." He paused. "And I will need to know who I can trust." The implication hung in the air. He wasn't offering freedom, not yet, but he was offering a different kind of role. He was acknowledging her not as property, but as someone with insight, someone whose information had value, perhaps even someone whose interests, in this specific instance, aligned with his own. "You will remain under guard," he stated, dashing any immediate hopes of changed circumstances. "But your observations, they have proven potentially valuable. Keep your eyes and ears open. Luna Serena, tell Kaylin, and only Kaylin, if you see or hear anything else of significance." It wasn't trust. Not fully. But it was a start. A dangerous, uncertain alliance forged in the crucible of shared threat and mutual suspicion. As Xavier turned back to his maps, already planning his next move, Serena felt a strange mix of trepidation and exhilaration. She was still a prisoner in the heart of the enemy stronghold, but she was no longer just a passive pawn. She had influenced events, potentially averted disaster, and caught the attention of the formidable Alpha Prince in a way that went beyond mere captivity. The game had changed, and the stakes were higher than ever. The fortress hummed with an undercurrent of suppressed tension in the days that followed. Kaylin's riders returned with grim news. The supply convoy had indeed been ambushed in the Whispering Gorge. There were survivors, but casualties were significant, and supplies were lost or destroyed. Crucially, the survivors reported that the attackers were swift and brutal, disappearing back into the dense forest before they could be properly identified. Though some were crude approximations of Whispering Pines markings Serena knew her pack wouldn't use in such a manner. It was clearly a staged attack, designed to look like her people were responsible, just as she had suspected. Xavier received the news with quiet fury, his face hardening, but he made no public accusations against Valerius. Instead, he tightened security subtly, replaced key guard posts with wolves unquestioningly loyal to him, and began his own quiet investigation. Using Kaylin as his eyes and ears, he knew Valerius was behind it, but proving it without causing open civil strife within his dominion required careful maneuvering. Serena remained in her room, but her circumstances shifted slightly. While still guarded, the guards were now clearly Kaylin's men, their demeanor professional but less overtly hostile. Alara continued her visits, now occasionally sharing more substantial pieces of gossip or observation. Perhaps sensing the subtle shift in the Luna's standing, or perhaps acting on Kaylin's discreet instructions, Serena learned that Valerius was furious that the ambush hadn't completely wiped out the convoy and, more importantly, hadn't immediately triggered a retaliatory strike from Xavier against the Whispering Pines. The prince's measured response had thwarted the immediate goal of the staged attack. Xavier summoned Serena to the strategy room more frequently, always under the guise of needing her knowledge of the disputed territories or Whispering Pines tactics. These sessions became a strange dance of strategic discussion and guarded personal revelation. He would ask her opinion on potential patrol routes, on the likelihood of her pack attempting certain maneuvers. His questions sharp and insightful. She answered honestly, focusing on defensive postures and the desire for her people to simply survive, subtly reinforcing the idea that they were not the aggressors Valerius painted them to be. During these meetings, the professional distance sometimes wavered. They would find themselves discussing the history of the feud between their packs, tracing its roots back through generations, discovering layers of misunderstanding and potential manipulation even then. Xavier spoke of the pressures of his lineage, the expectation to be stronger, more ruthless than his father, who some in the court whispered had been too accommodating. Serena, in turn, shared stories of her own upbringing, the emphasis on community, healing, and connection to the land that defined the Whispering Pines ethos. They discovered unexpected points of connection, a shared appreciation for ancient lore, a mutual understanding of the burdens of leadership, even if their styles differed vastly. Serena saw the loneliness that clung to him, the isolation of ultimate authority, especially now, knowing betrayal festered within his own council. Xavier, in turn, seemed increasingly intrigued by Serena's resilience, her sharp mind, and the unwavering loyalty she held for her people. Even in captivity, he saw not just a prisoner, but a leader in her own right, possessing a different kind of strength than the brute force valued by many in his court. The air between them crackled with an undeniable energy. Glances held a fraction too long. Hands brushed accidentally over maps. The cold, commanding Alpha Prince and the defiant, captive, Luna found themselves navigating treacherous new territory, not just politically, but emotionally. Serena felt a confusing mix of attraction and resentment. He was intelligent, complex, and possessed a hidden depth she hadn't anticipated. The glimpses of his vulnerability, his solitude, chipped away at her defenses. Yet, he was still her captor, the symbol of her pack's suffering. Xavier. Two seemed conflicted. Serena was the enemy, a political pawn, now a source of vital intelligence, but she was also courageous, intelligent, and possessed a warmth and compassion utterly foreign to the cold calculations of his court. Her presence challenged him, unsettled him, and inexplicably drew him in. He found himself seeking her counsel, not just for strategic advantage, but for her perspective, her clarity. He started ensuring better food was sent to her room. A warmer cloak against the mountain chill appeared one day without explanation. Small gestures, easily deniable, yet significant. One evening, they were working late in the strategy room. Kaelin had delivered a report, suggesting Valerius was trying to consolidate support among the borderland pack alphas, spreading discontent about Xavier's leadership. The tension was high. Xavier paced before the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on his face. "He's moving faster now," Xavier stated, his voice tight. "He knows I suspect him. He feels the net closing." "Can you prove his involvement in the ambush?" Serena asked, tracing the path of the Whispering Gorge on the map. "Not conclusively. The survivors' accounts are confused. The false markings were crude, but effective enough to sow doubt. Valerius has covered his tracks well." Xavier slammed a fist onto the mantelpiece, a rare show of frustration. "He uses plausible deniability twists every action to seem like prudent defense, while constantly undermining my authority. He preys on fear, Serena observed quietly. Fear of weakness, fear of the enemy. He offers simple, brutal solutions. Xavier stopped pacing and looked at her, his icy eyes intense. And what do you offer? Luna Serena. You counsel caution, understanding. Noble sentiments, perhaps, but do they win wars? Do they protect a kingdom? The challenge hung in the air. Serena met his gaze without flinching. They build a foundation for lasting peace. Prince Xavier. Something brute force alone can never achieve. Your strength is undeniable, but it breeds fear, not loyalty. Valerius offers only tyranny disguised as strength. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. There is another way. A strength found in unity, in trust, something your people crave. Even if they don't know how to ask for it, they stood mere inches apart, the air thick with unspoken words, charged with an energy that went far beyond strategy and politics. The flickering firelight softened the hard lines of Xavier's face, revealing the conflict in his eyes. He saw the passion in her expression, the conviction in her voice. He saw the leader she was, the potential queen she could be, standing defiant even in the heart of his power. Trust, he murmured, the word sounding foreign on his lips. A rare commodity in my world. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then flickered back up to meet her eyes. The air crackled. Serena felt her breath catch, her heart pounding against her ribs. The lines blurred completely. Captor, captive, enemy Ollie, man, woman. He leaned in, slowly, tentatively, giving her ample time to pull away. Serena stood frozen, caught in the magnetic pull of his gaze, the confusing storm of her own emotions. Part of her screamed betrayal, remembering her fallen packmates, her imprisoned state. But another part, the part that had seen his loneliness, his burden, the part that recognized the spark of connection between them, urged her forward. When his lips met hers, it wasn't a conqueror's kiss, demanding submission. It was hesitant at first, questioning, searching. Then, as she responded, a spark ignited, flaring into a sudden, consuming heat. It was a kiss born of conflict, of shared danger, of grudging respect, blossoming into undeniable passion. It spoke of lonely nights, of unexpected understanding, of the startling realization that the person they were supposed to hate might be the only one who truly saw them. The kiss deepened, desperation and need replacing hesitation, a raw, untamed energy flowing between them. Fierce and undeniable, they clung to each other, the maps and strategies forgotten, the world shrinking to the space between them. The only reality, the fire in their blood and the stunning, terrifying connection they had forged against all odds. They broke, apart, breathless, staring at each other in stunned silence. The air vibrated with the intensity of what had just happened. Xavier's eyes, usually so guarded, were wide with surprise and a raw emotion Serena couldn't decipher. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, a touch that sent shivers down her spine. Serena, he whispered, her name a rough sound on his lips. Reality crashed back in. Serena pulled away abruptly. Confusion and guilt warring within her. I shouldn't have, she stammered, turning away, wrapping her arms around herself. This is wrong. I am your prisoner. Xavier's expression hardened slightly, the mask slipping back into place. Though the intensity lingered in his eyes, what just happened changes nothing. And yet, it changes everything. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration or confusion. Valerius is still a threat. Your people are still suffering under the weight of this conflict. Then what are we doing? Serena asked, her voice trembling slightly. Playing with fire while both our worlds risk burning. Perhaps, Xavier conceded, his gaze fixed on her. Or perhaps we are forging the only weapon that can truly defeat enemies like Valerius. Trust. Alliance. He stepped towards her again, stopping just short of touching her. I believe your warning saved lives, Serena. I believe Valerius is a traitor who must be stopped. I need your help. Not as a prisoner giving information under duress, but as an ally. The offer hung in the air, momentous. An alliance. Not just a temporary sharing of information, but a true partnership against a common enemy. It was what she had argued for, unity, trust. But accepting it meant fully crossing a line, aligning herself with the Alpha Prince of the Moonstone Dominion, the man responsible for her captivity. And my people, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. What happens to the whispering pines if we succeed? Xavier met her gaze directly, his expression deadly serious. If we expose Valerius and neutralize his faction. The justification for this continued aggression crumbles. I cannot undo past the lives lost, but I can offer a future, a truce, negotiations, a chance for a lasting peace, built not on conquest, but on mutual understanding. He paused, letting the weight of his promise settle. I give you my word. Serena, help me secure my dominion from this internal threat, and I will seek peace with yours. It was a staggering offer. Peace. Something she hadn't dared hope for. It required a leap of faith, trusting the word of a man she had every reason to despise, but looking into his eyes, seeing the sincerity warring with his ingrained caution, seeing the man who kissed her with such desperate passion moments before, she found herself believing him. Perhaps this was the path forward. The only way to save her pack and potentially forge something new from the ashes of conflict. All right, Xavier, she said, meeting his gaze, the decision settling within her. Allie, tell me what we need to do. A flicker of relief, quickly masked, crossed Xavier's face. The tension in the room shifted again, solidifying into purpose. The passion still lingered, an unspoken undercurrent, but now it fueled a shared resolve. They turned back to the maps, no longer captor and captive, but two leaders planning their strategy, united against the darkness gathering within the fortress walls, the fate of two peoples resting on their dangerous, newly forged alliance. The alliance between Xavier and Serena operated in the shadows, a secret kept hidden within the heart of the Moonstone Fortress. Publicly, she remained the captive Luna. Her presence in the strategy room explained away as necessary consultation. Privately, they worked closely, sharing information, analyzing Valerius's movements, and anticipating his next move. Kaylin became their trusted intermediary, relaying messages, coordinating loyal guards, and conducting discreet inquiries. Alara, sensing the shift and fiercely loyal to Xavier despite her nervousness, became an invaluable source of information from the lower levels of the fortress, reporting on the moods and whispers among the staff and guards aligned with Valerius. Their clandestine meetings were charged with a dual tension: the constant threat of discovery by Valerius's spies and the undeniable magnetic pull between them. The passion ignited by their kiss remained, simmering beneath the surface of their strategic discussions, stolen glances, lingering touches over maps, moments of shared silence heavy with unspoken emotions, became frequent. They were allies bound by necessity, but the bond deepened with every shared risk, every small victory in their silent war against the traitor. Serena's insights proved invaluable. Her understanding of pack dynamics, subtle communication, and reading underlying intentions helped Xavier decipher Valerius's maneuvers. She predicted his attempts to sow dissent among the border packs, allowing Xavier to send Kaelin with messages of reassurance and subtle warnings, counteracting Valerius's influence before it could take root. She identified weaknesses in the fortress's internal security that Valerius might exploit, enabling Xavier to quietly reinforce them. Xavier, in turn, began to trust Serena's judgment implicitly. He saw the keen intellect behind her quiet determination, the strategic mind that complemented his own strength. He found himself sharing more of his burdens, the history of his family, the pressures he faced, not just from Valerius, but from the weight of expectations. He spoke of his father, a gentler Alpha, whose attempts at diplomacy had been perceived as weakness, leading to border skirmishes that eventually cost him his life. A death Xavier now suspected might not have been the accident it appeared, possibly orchestrated by those who favored a more aggressive stance, perhaps even Valerius's faction back then. This shared vulnerability forged a deeper intimacy. Serena saw the lonely man beneath the formidable Alpha Prince, the hidden scars he carried. Her initial animosity faded, replaced by a complex mix of empathy, respect, and burgeoning love. She hated what his dominion had done to hers, but the man himself was proving to be far more than the monster she had first perceived. Xavier found Serena's presence becoming essential, not just for strategy, but for his own equilibrium. Her calm strength centered him. Her compassion reminded him of the values beyond power and control. Her belief in a different path, a path towards peace, began to resonate deep within him, challenging his ingrained assumptions about leadership and conquest. The cold walls he had built around his heart began to crumble, breached by the warmth and resilience of the woman who was supposed to be his prisoner. Valerius, however, was not idle. Sensing Xavier's consolidation of power and perhaps suspecting Serena's influence, he grew bolder, more desperate. Minor incidents began to occur within the fortress, supplies vanishing, messages going astray, loyal guards reporting intimidation attempts by Valerius's known supporters. These were probing attacks, designed to test Xavier's resolve and sow uncertainty. The culmination of Valerius's plotting arrived sooner than they anticipated. Alara came to Serena's room one morning, pale and trembling. "Luna Serena," she whispered, wringing her hands. "Lord Valerius, he held a secret meeting late last night with Captain Malcor and several others known to be his staunchest allies. They spoke of the upcoming full moon ceremony, of a necessary change in leadership for the good of the Dominion." Serena's blood ran cold. The full moon ceremony was only 3 days away. It was a sacred event for the Moonstone Dominion, a time when the Alpha reaffirmed his bond with the pack and the ancestral spirits, often held in the Great Hall. A cavernous space deep within the mountain, it was a moment of symbolic power, but also potential vulnerability. "Did you hear anything else? Any specific plans?" Serena urged, keeping her voice calm to soothe the terrified servant. "Only fragments," Alara stammered. "Something about neutralizing the prince's guard, securing the hall. No witnesses left." She shuddered violently. It sounded like a coup, Luna, an assassination. Serena knew she had to get this information to Xavier immediately, dismissing Alara with reassurances she didn't feel. She signaled the guard outside her door, one of Kalen's trusted men. "Take me to the Alpha Prince. Now. It's urgent." She found Xavier and Kalen already in the strategy room, poring over reports of Valerius's increasingly brazen attempts to rally support. Serena relayed Ilara's terrifying news. Xavier listened intently, his face grim, his eyes turning to chips of ice. Kalen swore softly under his breath. "The full moon ceremony," Xavier mused, his mind already calculating. "Arrogant. He intends to strike during our most sacred ritual, hoping the shock and symbolism will guarantee his success." He looked at Kalen. "Malcor commands the inner guard rotation for the ceremony. Valerius has placed his key piece. We can arrest him now." "Alpha Prince," Kylan urged. "We have enough suspicion, enough testimony." Number Xavier interrupted firmly. "Suspicion isn't proof. Arresting him now, based largely on a servant's overheard words and our prisoner's accusations, could fracture the Dominion. Many still see Valerius as a loyal lord, merely overly zealous. If I move against him without undeniable proof, I could be seen as the tyrant, silencing dissent. He would become a martyr." He slammed his fist on the table. "He wants me to react rashly. We won't give him that satisfaction." "Then what do we do?" Serena asked, fear coiling in her stomach. "Let him attempt assassination during the ceremony." Xavier's icy gaze met hers, a dangerous glint in their depths. "We let him spring his trap," he said softly, "and we make sure it closes on him, not us." He turned to Kalen. "Double the loyalist guards, discreetly. Arm them well. Position our best warriors in concealed locations within the Great Hall and the surrounding corridors. Let Malcor think he controls the inner guard, but ensure every man reporting to him is shadowed by two of ours." He then looked at Serena, his expression intense. "Serena, Valerius sees you as a symbol of my supposed weakness, my sentimentality. He likely assumes you'll be kept locked away during the ceremony." He paused. "I want you in the Great Hall, not hidden away, but visible." Serena stared at him, shocked. "Visible? Why?" "That puts me directly in danger." "Precisely," Xavier confirmed, his voice grim. "Valerius, in his arrogance, might see your presence as the final insult, the final proof of my unfitness to rule according to his brutal standards. He might focus his initial move on you to remove the problem." "You want me to be bait?" Serena asked, incredulous, hurt flashing in her eyes. Xavier reached out, gripping her arms gently but firmly, forcing her to meet his gaze. The ice in his eyes melted slightly, revealing the conflict beneath. "No, Serena, not bait. A diversion, perhaps, but more importantly, a symbol of something else entirely. A symbol that leadership isn't just about brute force, a symbol of a potential future Valerius wants to extinguish." His grip tightened slightly. "I will not let him harm you. Kalen and my most elite guards will be positioned specifically to protect you. But your presence there, it changes the narrative. It shows I am not hiding, not cowering, not ruling through fear alone." He searched her face, his own expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "I know it is a tremendous risk to ask of you, but I believe your courage, your very presence, could be the key to exposing him fully, to rallying those who are hesitant, who secretly crave a different kind of leadership." He lowered his voice. "Trust me, Serena, as I am trusting you." She looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity, the desperate gamble he was taking. He was putting his life, his dominion, and now her safety on the line. betting everything on turning Valerius's own plot against him. Her fear warred with her loyalty, not just to her own pack anymore, but to this complex, burdened Alpha Prince who had somehow captured not just her body, but her heart. She thought of the peace he had promised, the future they could build. It was worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. Taking a deep breath, she nodded slowly. "All right, Xavier, I'll be there. But you better keep your word. I expect your elite guards to be very, very good." A ghost of a smile touched Xavier's lips, a rare sight that made her heart skip a beat. "They are the best, Serena, as are you." The air crackled with renewed purpose, the fear now overlaid with fierce determination. The final confrontation was set, in 3 days, under the light of the full moon, in the heart of the Moonstone Dominion's most sacred space. The fate of 2 packs, and the love forged in the crucible of conflict, would face its ultimate test. The night of the full moon ceremony arrived, cloaked in an atmosphere thick with anticipation and unspoken dread. The great hall, carved deep into the mountain's heart, was vast and echoing. Torches flickered in wall sconces, casting long, dancing shadows across the stone floor and illuminating ancient tapestries depicting Moonstone history, great hunts, legendary battles, past alphas communing with wolf spirits under lunar skies. A large opening high in the vaulted ceiling allowed the silvery light of the full moon to beam down, bathing the central dais in an ethereal glow. Members of the Moonstone Pack filled the hall, their faces a mixture of reverence for the ceremony and underlying anxiety. Whispers had circulated despite Xavier's efforts at secrecy. The tension was palpable. Serena stood near the dais, as instructed, dressed not as a prisoner but in a simple, dark gown Kaelin had procured for her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, hundreds of pairs of eyes occasionally flicking towards her, the enemy Luna. Inexplicably present at their sacred rite, her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her chin high, her gaze steady, projecting a calm she did not feel. Kaelin stood unobtrusively nearby, his hand ever far from the hilt of his sword, his eyes constantly scanning the crowd. Other loyal guards, disguised amongst the attendees or hidden in the shadowed alcoves, were poised for action. Xavier made his entrance, commanding silence as he strode towards the dais. He wore ceremonial robes of deep silver and black, the moonstone sigil gleaming on his chest. He looked every inch the powerful Alpha Prince, his face an unreadable mask, yet Serena, knowing him now, could see the coiled tension beneath the surface, the readiness in his icy gaze. He ascended the dais, turning to face his pack, the moonlight illuminating his stark features. Lord Valerius stood prominently among the senior council members near the front, his face composed but his eyes glittering with ill-concealed triumph and malice. Captain Malcor and his contingent of inner guards, supposedly loyal but secretly Valerius's pawns, took their positions around the dais, forming a seemingly protective cordon. The ceremony began with ancient chants, invocations to the moon and the spirit wolves. Xavier's deep voice resonated through the hall, carrying the weight of tradition, the burden of his lineage, as he spoke of strength, unity, and the future of the Dominion. Serena watched Valerius closely. She saw the subtle signals pass between him and Malcor, the slight tensing of the guards Valerius had compromised. The moment came as Xavier raised a ceremonial silver chalice, preparing for the ritual pledge of loyalty. Valerius chose that instant to strike. "Now!" Valerius roared, his voice cutting through the sacred silence. For the true strength of the Dominion, chaos erupted. Malcor and his men drew their weapons, turning not outwards to protect, but inwards towards Xavier. Simultaneously, other conspirators planted throughout the hall revealed themselves, creating pockets of confusion and attacking nearby loyalists. Valerius himself lunged towards the dais, dagger flashing, aiming not initially at Xavier, but, as Xavier had predicted, at Serena. "The foreign witch dies first," Valerius snarled, his face contorted with hatred, seeing her presence as the ultimate symbol of Xavier's weakness. But Xavier's preparations held. Kalen intercepted Valerius mid-lunge, his sword meeting the traitor's dagger with a clang that echoed through the hall. The loyal guards shadowing Malcor's men instantly engaged them, turning the inner cordon into a deadly melee right at the foot of the dais. Xavier's hidden warriors emerged from the shadows, swiftly moving to contain the uprising, protecting the stunned pack members and engaging the other pockets of rebellion. The Great Hall transformed into a battleground. The sounds of chanting were replaced by the clash of steel, shouts, and cries of pain. Serena, despite the guards assigned to protect her, found herself in the heart of the storm as Valerius, furious at being intercepted, fought Kalen with savage intensity, trying to break through towards her and Xavier. Xavier, drawing his own ancestral sword from beneath his robes, met Malcor's charge head-on. He moved with blinding speed and precision, his wolfish grace translating into deadly efficiency in combat. He was outnumbered on the dais itself, but fought like a cornered wolf, defending his ground, his icy eyes blazing with righteous fury. Serena wasn't trained for formal combat like the Moonstone warriors, but she wasn't helpless. Years of surviving in the wild, of defending herself and her pack, had honed her instincts. Seeing one of Valerius's men slip past the guards, aiming a crossbow towards an engaged Xavier's exposed back, she reacted without thinking. Shoving aside a heavy ceremonial brazier, she sent it crashing into the attacker, knocking him off balance just as he fired. The bolt flew wide, embedding itself harmlessly in the stone wall. Her action drew attention. Another conspirator lunged at her, sword raised. One of her protectors intercepted him, but not before the attacker's blade slashed her arm, the same arm bitten during her capture. Pain flared. Sharp and hot, but adrenaline surged through her. She wouldn't fall. She wouldn't be the weakness Valerius perceived. Xavier, having dispatched Malcor with a swift, decisive move, saw Serena stumble, saw the blood welling on her arm. He saw the determination in her eyes as she stayed standing, defiant. A fierce protectiveness surged through him, overriding everything else. He fought his way towards her, cutting down two more assailants who blocked his path, his movements fueled by a cold rage. Valerius, momentarily disengaging from Kalen with a vicious counterattack, saw his chance. With Xavier distracted by Serena's injury and moving towards her, Valerius saw an opening. He launched himself at the Alpha Prince, aiming his dagger straight for Xavier's heart. "Xavier!" Serena screamed, seeing the danger. There was no time for guards to react, no time for Xavier to fully turn. Acting purely on instinct, fueled by the love and loyalty she now felt for the man she once considered her enemy, Serena threw herself forward, positioning her own body between Xavier and Valerius's deadly strike. The dagger plunged deep into her shoulder, the impact stealing her breath, agony ripping through her. She gasped, stumbling backwards into Xavier, who caught her, his eyes wide with horror and disbelief as he saw the hilt protruding from her shoulder, so close to her heart. "Serena!" His roar was primal, filled with anguish and fury. that moment of sacrifice. That undeniable proof of loyalty from the enemy Luna stunned the onlookers, even amidst the chaos. Valerius, momentarily shocked by his own action, hitting Serena instead of Xavier, hesitated for a fatal second. It was all Xavier needed. With a snarl that was more wolf than man, he surged forward, his sword a blur of silver vengeance. He disarmed Valerius with brutal efficiency, his blade finding its mark, ending the traitor's ambition and his life in a single, swift stroke. As Valerius fell, the remaining pockets of resistance faltered, seeing their leader defeated, seeing the Alpha Prince's terrifying fury. Xavier's loyal forces quickly subdued the last of the conspirators, securing the hall. Silence descended, broken only by the whimpers of the injured and the ragged breathing of the survivors. Xavier ignored everything else, kneeling beside Serena, cradling her gently. "Serena, stay with me," he pleaded, his voice thick with emotion. The icy control shattered. He ripped fabric from his own robe, pressing it against the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes fluttered open, finding his. Did we win?" she whispered, her voice weak. "We won," he confirmed, his voice choked. "You saved me, Serena." "You foolish, brave woman, you saved me." A faint smile touched her lips. "Allies, protect each other," she murmured before her eyes drifted closed. Panic seized Xavier. "Healer!" he roared, his voice echoing in the suddenly silent hall. "Get the healers here now!" He lifted her carefully into his arms, ignoring the stares of his pack, his only focus the precious, fragile life he held. He carried her out of the blood-stained hall, leaving Kaelin to oversee the aftermath, his heart clenching with a fear colder than any winter storm. He had faced down betrayal and secured his throne. But the victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the potential cost, the life of the woman who had not only saved him, but had somehow become his everything. Serena hovered in a haze of pain and feverish dreams for days. The healers worked tirelessly, using both traditional moonstone remedies and herbs Serena's own presence had inadvertently introduced to their knowledge base. The dagger had missed her heart by a mere fraction, but the wound was deep, the risk of infection high. Xavier rarely left her side. He sat vigil, dismissing council meetings, delegating command to Kaelin. His entire focus narrowed to the still figure in the large bed, a bed moved into his own chambers, a place of ultimate security and proximity. He watched her breathe, monitored her fever, spoke to her softly even when she was unresponsive, telling her of the aftermath, of Valerius's conspiracy fully exposed, his supporters arrested, or swearing renewed fealty out of fear or genuine remorse. He told her how her act of bravery had stunned the Dominion, how whispers were already spreading, not of the enemy Luna, but of the courageous woman who sacrificed herself for the Alpha Prince. He confessed his fears, his regrets about the conflict, the dawning realization that his pursuit of dominance had blinded him to the possibility of a different path, a path she had shown him. He spoke of his growing feelings for her, words he hadn't dared utter when she was conscious, pouring out the contents of his guarded heart into the quiet stillness of the room. Slowly, agonizingly, Serena began to heal. The fever broke. Her breathing steadied. One afternoon, her eyes fluttered open, focusing uncertainly on the man sitting beside her bed, his usual immaculate appearance disheveled, dark shadows stark beneath his eyes. "Xavier," she whispered, her voice raspy. Relief washed over him so intensely it almost brought him to his knees. He gripped her hand gently, his thumb stroking her knuckles. I'm here, Serena. I'm here. The pain, she murmured, wincing slightly. It will lessen, he assured her. The healers say the worst is over. You were incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. A faint smile touched his lips, filled with affection. Serena managed a weak smile in return. Someone had to save the grumpy Alpha Prince from himself. Their banter was fragile, but it was a start. Over the following weeks, as Serena regained her strength, the dynamic between them shifted definitively. The last vestiges of captor and captive dissolved, replaced by a deep, abiding affection and mutual respect. Xavier tended to her needs personally whenever possible, bringing her broth, reading reports aloud to keep her informed, or simply sitting in comfortable silence, his presence a reassuring anchor. They talked for hours, truly talked, shedding the last layers of pretense. Serena spoke of her longing for her forests, her worry for her father and her pack. Xavier listened, truly listened, acknowledging her pain and her loyalty. He, in turn, shared his vision for the future, not just for the Moonstone Dominion, but for a potential peace that included the Whispering Pines. He had already sent envoys under Kaylin's careful supervision to her father, Alpha Riker, explaining the situation, detailing Valerius's treachery, and proposing a truce, citing Serena's bravery as a bridge between their peoples. News eventually returned. Alpha Riker, while cautious, was willing to meet. The revelation that the recent escalation, including the devastating ambush, was orchestrated by a Moonstone traitor, not Xavier's direct command, coupled with the news of his daughter's survival and her role in stopping the coup, had significantly altered his perspective. A fragile hope for peace began to dawn as Serena became well enough to walk, leaning lightly on Xavier for support. They explored parts of the fortress she had never seen as a prisoner. He took her to the high ramparts overlooking the vast snow-capped mountain ranges, sharing the fierce pride he felt for his land, but also acknowledging the harshness, the isolation. He showed her the hidden libraries, filled with ancient lore, where they spent hours discussing history, mythology, and the differing philosophies of their packs. The passion that had ignited between them rekindled, now tempered with tenderness and deep emotional intimacy, stolen moments in quiet corridors, shared meals that felt less like strategy sessions and more like dates. The comfortable silence of merely being in each other's presence all wove a strengthening bond. One evening, standing on a balcony overlooking the moonlit mountains, the air crisp and cold, Xavier turned to Serena. He took both her hands, his usually icy eyes warm and serious. "Serena," he began, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "When you were captured, I saw you only as a means to an end, a way to force your father's hand. Then, I saw you as a source of intelligence, an unexpected ally against the darkness within my own court." He paused, his gaze searching hers. "But now I see only you, the brave, intelligent, compassionate woman who saved my life, challenged my beliefs, and showed me what true strength looks like. It isn't just about command or power, it's about loyalty, sacrifice, and the courage to seek peace even in the face of hatred." He took a deep breath. "My dominion needs healing after Valerius's betrayal. Your people need reassurance and a path towards recovery. I believe, I know, that we are stronger together than apart." He squeezed her hands gently. I never allowed myself to believe I could feel this way. But Serena, I love you, not as a prisoner, not as an ally, But as the woman who has captured my heart completely, he knelt then, before her, the powerful Alpha Prince humbling himself. I cannot change the past, the pain my actions caused, but I can offer you a future, our future. Stand beside me, Serena, not as my prisoner, but as my partner, my equal, my queen. Help me lead our people, Moonstone and Whispering Pines, towards a lasting peace, a prosperity built on the unity you embody. He looked up at her, his heart in his eyes. Will you be my queen, Serena? Tears welled in Serena's eyes, tears of joy, relief, and overwhelming love. This man, who had started as her fearsome captor, was now offering her everything, his heart, his future, a chance for peace for her people. Her own feelings for him were undeniable, a fierce, protective love that had grown from the ashes of conflict. She saw the sincerity in his gaze, the hope for a shared future. Yes, Xavier, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she knelt to meet him, framing his face with her hands. Yes, I will be your queen. He surged upwards, pulling her into a fierce, passionate embrace, kissing her with all the love and relief pent up inside him. It wasn't the hesitant kiss of the strategy room, nor the desperate one from the battle's aftermath. This was a kiss of promise, of partnership, of a future forged together, bathed in the hopeful light of the moon. Their union marked a turning point. Negotiations with Alpha Riker progressed swiftly, cemented by the genuine respect that had grown between the two Alphas, facilitated by Serena's presence and Xavier's clear commitment to peace. A formal treaty was signed, ending generations of hostility, establishing new boundaries based on mutual respect, and fostering trade and cooperation. The Whispering Pines territory remained sovereign, but allied closely with the Moonstone Dominion, ensuring mutual protection and shared prosperity. Serena, standing beside Xavier as his queen, became a powerful symbol of this new era. Her compassion tempered his authority. Her knowledge of healing and nature brought balance to the Dominion's strength, and her unwavering commitment to unity helped bridge the gap between the two formerly warring peoples. She worked tirelessly, establishing programs for rebuilding border communities, fostering cultural exchange, and ensuring the fair treatment of all shifters under their joint rule. Xavier, with Serena by his side, ruled with a newfound wisdom and depth. He remained a strong, decisive leader, but his strength was now anchored in justice and a genuine desire for his people's well-being, rather than just dominance. He listened to his counsel, but more importantly, he listened to his queen, their partnership a beacon of the change sweeping through the lands. The loneliness that had once clung to him vanished, replaced by the warmth of shared love and purpose. Together, Alpha Prince Xavier and Queen Serena guided their united peoples out of the shadows of conflict and into an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. The Alpha Prince's prisoner had not only captured his heart, but had become the queen who healed a fractured kingdom. Their love story a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the enduring hope that even the deepest wounds could heal, and the fiercest enemies could find common ground, forging a future brighter than either could have imagined alone. Their reign was long and just, forever remembered as the time the Moonstone and the Whispering Pines learned to shine together under the same moon.